Welcome to the Women in Publishing Summit. We have another really incredible panel of amazing women for you today to talk about a topic that all of us can benefit from. If you are writing at anything, strong writing practices is something that you should really consider. It's been my experience that a lot of people think that writing a book is going to be easy until they start to do it. And then they realize, oh, they need some kind of courses in how to write, what to write, when to write, all of these types of things. So these women today are going to give you all of their best advice on how you can really, really develop a strong writing practice. There are lots of different ideas and ways to do things. And you're going to get a variety of insight. I'm your host, Alexa Bigwar, if I forgot to say that. And we are just thrilled to have you as part of this online conference and this community of women. Publishing a book is a scary process for many different reasons. And we hope that through this summit, you know that you have a whole bunch of ladies who have your back and you have a whole bunch of new knowledge to help you get through the process. Welcome to Eileen Cook, who you may have seen already in her amazing solo presentation. Make sure you check that out if you didn't. We have Caroline Topperman, JC Sutton, and Casey Matthews. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here. Rather than trying to tell you all about all of these women, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. So we will start with Eileen.
It's good to see you again. So I'm Eileen Cook. I write primarily psychological thrillers. So I have a book coming out actually in March, You Owe Me a Murder. So there's a happy little topic for a morning. I am also an instructor. So I work with both Simon Fraser University as well as the Online Creative Academy, where I'm doing mentorship with other writers. I have over 15 books in print at this point. So I've been around this bend for a little while, and I'm looking forward to talking about this topic. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, Caroline.
Hi, so thank you so much for having me. My name is Caroline Topperman. I'm a blogger and a writer, and I recently moved back to Canada from living in Europe for the past 4 years. And I came across a horrible case of writer's block and couldn't write and just stared out the window for hours on end. And what that resulted in was my book, Visual Writing Prompts for the Wandering Writer, which got me out of it and got me writing again.
Amazing. So that's good. We will defer all questions on writer's block to Caroline. Okay, JC, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm JC Sutton. I am a recent transplant to Dallas, Texas. I came from Minnesota.
Oh, that's a big change.
It's a very big change. I was very cold there. I'm much warmer now. And I have my first book that I published, which is available to chat. And I have just finished writing my third book, which I am hoping to be telling you about at next year's conference.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. And Casey.
Hi, Casey Matthews. I am a mom of two in New Hampshire. I am a book writing coach and an author and a speaker. My first book is Preemie, Lessons in Love, Life, and Motherhood. And my next is that just came out this past fall, A Mom's Guide to Creating a Magical Life.
And she sent me copies of both of these books because we connected over our preterm babies, and they are beautiful, beautiful books. Thank you all very much for being a part of this. So let's get right to it. I'm just going to ask a very straightforward question, and that would be, when you are helping someone develop a strong writing practice, like what does that look like? What are your tips, and how do you even define it first? What is a strong writing practice? Eileen.
I think the first thing that it took me the longest time to figure out is that what works for one writer doesn't work for another. So, I used to think like, a good writing practice means you set the alarm extra early and you're up at 5 a.m. and you're writing before work. And the truth is, at least for me, nothing good happens at 5 a.m. Not one good thing at all. So what is important is that your writing practice works for you. And for some people, that's writing a little bit every day. For some people, it's blocking off an evening or an afternoon or other blocks of time. But it's about making a commitment. and making your writing a priority, and that's something that you're going to stick with. So that's my thought.
Awesome. Caroline?
Yeah, I agree with Eileen. Those are great tips. I'm going to add that I would also say that you need to be reading. You need to be reading everything you can get your hands on, whatever genre you can get, read it, because it doesn't matter if you write, for example, thrillers like Eileen, but you should really be experiencing all different kinds of writing. That's super key. And then the other thing that I would say is don't be afraid to let people read what you write. Because I know I do that too. I write things and then I'm like, no one can read it. No one can see it. And I freak out and it's like panic attack. And it really is important, if you're going to develop your writing, to have people read what you're writing, and just get used to that, because that will actually make it a lot stronger.
Yeah, we're going to come back to this topic because that's an important one. All right, JC.
Yes, absolutely agree with both of the previous panelists. I think that what helps me is picking a specific time and sticking with it. So I am the 5 a.m. writer. I get up at 5 in the morning and a cup of coffee and I am ready to write. Because for me, when I come home, I'm also a writer during the day. I'm a communications director. And when I get home at 5 p.m., my creative juices have dried up for the day. But what works for me is just having it at the exact same time so that I am committed to that time period. And if I wake up one morning and I'm not able to write, I try to do something else creative so that I stick with that 5 a.m., wake up, and be in the mood of creating something.
You know, routine is such an important thing. I read an article that I quote a lot of times with people that writing is just like exercising. Like you have to exercise those muscles. You have to be doing it on a regular basis, even if it's only for 15 minutes a day. So that's an excellent point. Casey, what would you like to add to that?
Again, echoing and agreeing with what everybody said. And then, the philosophy of to write well, you have to live well. So I think there's a real component of self-care that comes into this. And for all my writers, I use the metaphor that's like, you are now pregnant with this baby when it's a book, that it's you have the seed within you that is needing nourishment. And, so in order to let this baby within you thrive and grow under the best conditions, you've got to take really good care of yourself first, which means, the exercise, the nourishment, the meditation. And for me, that's like sort of that number one priority. And then putting in all these other practical ways of approaching the writing, because you've shown up as your best self and taken care of yourself first. So that's what I have to add.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit different with this next question. It's not going to be necessarily a question, but a statement that I would ask you to agree or disagree with. So writing, even though all of us are capable of sitting down and picking up a pen and a paper or sitting down at the keyboard and typing, writing is a finely honed skill, and you should not try to write a book without taking some kind of writing practice. True or false? And this is not, no answer is right or wrong. It's your opinion.
I'm going to say false.
All right. Go for it.
I believe.
Defend your choice.
I will, by gosh. And maybe it's because I think there's something really wonderful about when I started writing, I had no idea what I was doing. And there was a lot of freedom that just came from like, I'm going to write a book. And for clarity, it was a horrible book. Like, I would make a difference between, do you need some writing practice before you publish? Yes. But to write is to express yourself. And I'm a firm believer, just go out and do it.
Love it. Caroline.
I agree 100%. False. I mean, I wrote my first book when I was 8. And I got my first rejection from an editor when I was 8.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
That's all right. Um,
But you kept going.
I did, right? This is like years later and I'm still at it. So I think absolutely. I think everybody has a story, and it can be, it doesn't, and that's what's so amazing about bloggers, right? If you kind of look at some consistent bloggers, a lot of the ones who spend a lot of time writing, they happen to be online, but those are mini books.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely think that everybody has a story, and everybody should be able to tell their story, whatever that is that's sitting deep within.
Yeah, agreed. JC.
So I believe that it really depends. What is your goal with writing? Mm-hmm. So my goal, I like having a published book. But I think that writing is so therapeutic and so creative, and that everyone can benefit by writing. And so I'm going to also say false, because it depends what you want the outcome to be. And when I have friends who are having a bad day, I will often say to them, do you ever sit and write these thoughts down? Because even that can be so beneficial. And so the start of writing, as you begin, I think is open to everyone. I definitely think that having a community around you as you want to progress with your writing is absolutely crucial. But yeah, to start, have at it.
Mm-hmm. And Casey.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp with of course, falls, everybody, write. But I do believe that there are so many resources out there for us, and writing is such a lonely process. Mm-hmm. That finding a community, going to a writer's day, and that really coming to learn about yourself as a writer. Are you disciplined? Do you get up at 5 a.m? Do you carve out the time in between your day job? Are you building this writing muscle, if that is your goal, to have a published book? Or do you need someone to hold you accountable? Do you need to form a writing group so that you're meeting once a month and you're showing up with your pages? That type of thing. So I think it's getting to know yourself and how you function as a writer and what your end goal is. And then if need be, you reach out for accountability with others, or you say, I got this on my own. But at some point, you have to have eyes on your work to help guide you and take you to the next step. It's inevitable. So.
Yeah, y'all are my people. I asked that because I'm definitely in the same camp with all of you. I mean, I feel that writing saved my life really after we lost our daughter. So I am definitely in the camp of just sit down and write. But then what happened was I'm writing and I wanted to write better, and I wanted to have books that people would buy and not be like, what in the heck is all of this garbage? So then you get to the point where you start investing in some of maybe more of the tools and the practices to write better, but that's farther down the road. And I as I mentioned before we started recording, that I see people with women in particular with so many fears that just stop them from even starting the process. So I'm glad you all responded that way, because I really wanted people to feel like you don't have to be perfect when you sit down and start writing, that you can just start writing and then worry about the rest of it later.
And I think, sorry, I'm just going to jump in.
Go ahead.
I think Casey said it, but I agree 100%. And the key is to find that group of people that support you, because it doesn't matter if you're writing to be published or not to be published. I mean, at some point, if you're writing to be published, great. They're the ones who are going to be your first probably your beta readers, and help you out with that and help you find those resources. But it's finding that community of writers. That was for me, when I came back to Canada, that was so crucial, was to find those people that I knew could support me and help me, because it is such an isolating endeavor to sit and just write on your own. There's days where I don't talk to anybody. So that's really the key. And then to that next level, I would say, is to find an editor. An editor can be your best friend. They're not really scary people. And I know I have another book that I'm working on that I wrote, and I was trying to get it published for a year, and I kept getting the same feedback from agents. And finally I sat down with my editor, and we're completely redoing the book. And yes, I swear at her every single day, because it's more work than I thought I would ever have to put into this book. But I think in the end, it'll be super rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to add something too to that. The idea of, we get very focused on the product, this end product of having a book that you can put out in the world and share with others. But there is so much beauty, grace, healing, learning in the process of writing a book. And Alexa, you really spoke to it when you're like, this writing practice saved my life. When you were really at the next stage where you're ready to take it to publication and bringing in the resources. But that initial part, I mean, I believe so strongly, and I think most people agree, that writing truly has the power to heal. And when we bring that story out from within us and let it be held on the page, there's so much that happens along the way as we learn how to write a book. We learn how to pull the curtain back on the publishing process and learn about this world. We learn so much about ourselves in the process that is invaluable as big life lessons. So I just want to add.
I want to add, I think, you talked about women in particular, and I think one of the challenges that women have is we're struggle with the idea of it not being right.
Yeah.
Like, we want everything to look good. And so if I could say anything to anyone, it would be like, give yourself permission to have a shitty first draft. Because for me, I struggled so long where I would have this great idea and then I would go to write it down and it wouldn't be great on the page. So I would say, oh, it's not a good idea, or even worse, oh, I'm not a good writer. And then I would throw that away, and then I would come up with something new and be like, oh, this is a good idea. And repeat ad nauseum for a period of time. And the best thing that I think you can learn as a writer is everybody has lousy first drafts. That's why they're called first drafts. And the real writing is the rewriting.
Yeah. And there's magic in editing. Even if you want to curse out your editor all the time, like, they will get it to the next level.
Oh, absolutely.
Were you going to say something, Caroline? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just laughing that absolutely editors can be your absolute best friend. And I agree 100% that first draft, it's just, those are your thoughts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are never bad. Your thoughts are always great. And the editor comes in to do the polishing with you.
Absolutely. Okay. So now that we've narrowed it down, or opened it up, I should say, and decided that there's no one right way to do it, and there's no right time to do it, and there's no, let's pull it back and add a little bit of structure, because then if we go too loose, then that's very overwhelming as well. Okay. So when am I going to do this? So, we won't go in any particular order. If you have something that you want to say, we'll just stomp all of each other. I'm kidding. We'll figure it out. But if you were, I imagine, like with anything, the clients who are your style will find you. So so you assume that your writing practices are going to work with the client that let's just talk to a client here. When you're first getting started with somebody, what's the process that you take? How do you help them figure out how to establish that writing practice and where to go?
The first thing that I want to do is talk with someone and understand what is the book that they want to write and what is it that inspires them. And I encourage them to write that down, because when we start a project, we're so excited and ready to gung-ho. And as we go through that process, sometimes you need to look back and remember, like, oh, right, this is why I wanted to write that book. And then I'm talking with them about where are we going to carve out that time. And maybe they're up with JC, which is great. Just don't call me at that hour. That's super. Maybe they're doing it during their lunch break at work. Maybe they're doing that after the kids are in bed. But I really encourage people to think in terms of writing sprints is a great place to start. So setting a timer for even just 15 minutes. And for 15 minutes, turn off that email, turn off the Facebook, shut the door to your office, put the sign on the door for the kids that says, unless you're bleeding, don't knock. And, write for those 15 minutes and start getting in that habit that Casey talked about, where you have some kind of routine where this is what you do. And and often what I find, at least, is if I say to myself, if I just write for 15 minutes, I give myself permission to then move on to other things, I'll often actually end up writing for 30 minutes or an hour. Right. But just having that set time where I'm holding myself accountable goes a long way. So I'll start there.
It's kind of like exercising. Again, I go back to this analogy, but for me, honest to goodness, the hardest part is putting on my exercise clothes once I have on my sports bra, my t-shirt, shorts, and shoes, I can go do it. So, that same kind
because getting in a sports bra is like its own level of exercise by itself.
Exactly. But it's that same idea. If you just keep saying, oh, I'll find time later, I'll do this later, I'll whatever, then the later never comes. But if you sit down and pull out the computer or pull out your notepad or whatever and start writing, then you're more likely to actually do it. That's a great tip.
I think that as I've been working with people who are writing, so because everybody has a different time that they write and a different routine, and I think the way you write is really different. So I have one woman I work with, and she believes she has to write the whole story out from beginning to end without looking back and without editing. And that's what works for her. And then she can go back. And to her, if she has to go back and read each little piece, she won't move forward. Mm-hmm. I personally, I'm the opposite. I write my section and then I go back and rewrite it. And I need it to be in shape before I can move forward. So I think that the thing is to find the writer's style, what works for them, and help them within that to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
I agree with that, and I'm gonna add too. But what I do as well with people, it's funny because I actually have a degree in screenwriting. So we got like a lot of things in our brains at the beginning of school way back when, but one of the things that was most helpful to me, and this is just for everybody across the board, is even if you're not working on a piece and if you're just writing, to sit down and write, but at this point not actually read it. And it doesn't matter if you spelled things wrong, and it doesn't matter, like, don't cross anything out, and just let that stream of consciousness go, because that's also really good too, because that works that writing muscle. And then another thing that I do with people, because I do a lot of workshops for the book I wrote. So what I realized is that like 65% of us are actually visual learners. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I need that visual stimulation, and I need to see things, and I need to picture what I'm writing. Like, that's a big part of my writing. I need to like actually close my eyes and see it. Mm-hmm. So what I do is a lot of just take a photo, like how many, we all probably have like 1 billion photos on our phones, right? My phone yells at me constantly to clean it out. So I just go back a couple of years and pick a photo that I've forgotten about, and I just write from that too. And that's what I teach people to do too. I find that really helps. And it's funny that, Alexa, you keep bringing up fitness, because I used to actually be an instructor. I used to dance, and I was a Pilates instructor, and that's exactly what we always told people to do. Like, just put your stuff next to the bed, and put it on first thing in the morning, and it doesn't have to be at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Well, and Casey mentioned the idea of self-care. And to me, self-care is such an important part of this whole process, because when you're run down and all those kinds of things. And for me, I find that going and taking a walk or meditating or doing something like that, like, gets those juices flowing like nothing else in terms of creativity. But I love this idea of the visual stuff, because we had a speaker last year that talked about the importance of music when she's writing, and like how she had to have certain playlists on while she was writing. Now, I can't listen to music at all unless I'm writing about a specific scene that the music is really important. Like this book that I'm writing about my time in Paris, which I will publish probably in like 2080. There's a scene in a nightclub, and for me to actually write this scene in the nightclub, like, I have to put on the techno music that was playing in 1999 France when I was having this scene down, right? But other than that, like, no music, I can't do it. But it's, again, it's this whole idea of your writing practice will be very much crafted by what inspires you, what gets it going, all of that stuff. Casey, would you like to add anything?
And it's kind of, I sometimes make myself sound like a crazy person, but these are the ways, you come out this way and go in. But, I believe so strongly in personifying your book. Following along with this metaphor of the pregnancy is that this is a being. So I encourage all my writings to be in constant conversation with this being and actually speaking directly to their baby, to their book, and being in partnership and asking, what do you want? Where do you want to go? And it's this really nice journey that you're really not alone on. And especially when you get to these times of writer's block and you can't find your way forward, it's, turning to your book and saying, what do you want? And just listen. Just hearing what often she has to say. And, she may tell you what she wants you to call her. She gives herself a name out other than your title. So really getting in, close relationship with your book. That's my, kind of profound thought. And then on a very practical level, I encourage all my writers to know your first line for the next day. And that's from Stephen King's book On Writing is one of my, I think of all the writing books out there, that's my favorite. And that's what his practice is that he always knows what his first line is going to be the next day, so that it's similar to your exercise clothes are sitting there. You already know you're not staring at a blank page or computer screen thinking, now what do I do? Your first line is there, go.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent.
Could I add one other thing? So I think that visualization is so important and so crucial. So this for me is so much fun to do. I have my Pinterest board, and when I am writing and I have a character, I imagine what they will look like. So I might find a model on the internet, or I wrote a wedding scene that took place in 1968. And so I just had fun looking at all of the fashions of 1968 and then pinning that up there. And that is such a source of inspiration for me. And it's just so much fun to do.
And I'm going to add just a practical thing that I go through with other writers when I'm talking with them, which is I was so great in my day job about being organized and focused, but I wasn't with my writing. And so it was a very interesting thing when I started to be like, what if I actually project a book, right? And so, I talk with writers about, well, when do you want to have this book completed by? All right, well, now let's work backwards from there. If you want to have a draft at a year, and we know that an adult novel is going to be around, say, 85,000 words, how many words do you need to be writing each week? And sort of really kind of putting some practical, how much time are you going to give yourself for research? Because I would spend months looking at wedding gowns from 1960. That sounds so much fun to me. I can't even tell you. Like, I'm not even writing a book there, and I'm like, I now want to know. So, how much time are you going to give yourself to look at those things? How much time are you going to, be blocking out? And not that those things can't shift and change when, things happen, but without having some kind of SMART goals, specific, measurable, all those kinds of things, then I don't reach for those things. And those goals also need to be big, hairy, audacious, chewy goals that you want to go after. But you have to put some feet under them, I think.
I love the different perspectives taken here and the different ideas. I mean, like we said at the very beginning, there's so many different ways to do this. And the really important thing, I think, is just, a couple of things that I want to highlight. And that is that we've mentioned that writing can be really isolating. We've mentioned that it can be really overwhelming. We've mentioned all of these types of things. And I'm going to ask a question just so you can prepare yourselves while I'm going off here. I'm going to ask about your best strategies for writer's block and for getting out of a complete, just like staring at a blank screen. If you don't have anything to add, because some of you have already alluded to this, that's cool. But I want to let people know that in the last decade, we've put this huge emphasis on self-publishing and let everybody know that they can do it all by themselves. But doing it all by themselves does not actually mean you have to do it all by yourself. So, you are in control of the publishing thing is what self-publishing means. But don't be afraid to reach out to someone to help you, because it's much, 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 much better to have somebody help you and guide you through the process than 6 years down the road, look at somebody who publishes a book that you were going to write and say, doggone it, that should have been my book and it should have been out there 6 years ago. So that's just one thing as I was thinking about this, you know, that it's really, there's listening to all of you ladies and all of your wonderful advice. And I mean, there are people that can help you get through the isolation, get through the roadblocks, get through the fear, all of those types of things. So now let's jump to a major roadblock. And that is, whether it is made up in your own mind or not, like serious roadblocks where you're just like, I just cannot write. I have this idea. I cannot put it on paper. So we'll start with Caroline on this one, since she opened up with that she had 4 years of a block. Was it 4 years?
No, I was in Europe for 4 years, and the block was several months.
Okay, that's still significant. So let's go. What happened? How'd you work through it?
So basically, like I said, I loved my life in Europe. It was fantastic. And then one day my husband comes home and goes, oh, by the way, I'm getting transferred. And now I'm stuck in like this small town in Ontario, which I hate. I can't. I'm not even pretending anymore. I keep telling everyone that I'm just like, oh, you know, I'm adjusting. Adjustment's not happening. So the first thing I did is found that community. And I'm going to officially say this right now. I kind of want to work with like all the other people in this group right now.
We can just form our own little group and just, you know.
Yeah. So you'll all be hearing from me probably. And I actually met I joined a different group and splintered off with some other writers who and I'll say it, they're a lot more advanced than I am in a way. Like they're just a lot more, they've published a lot more, done a lot more than I've done. And I'm intimidated every single time, but I keep sending them my work to completely trash because it's great and it's just really good practice for me. But on an aside, so what I did is one day I was just sitting there and I was like literally ready to leave my husband a card saying like, I'm moving back to Europe. I can't do this. I love him, but you know. And then I went and this is not something everybody has to do, but I went and I got a Polaroid camera. And so, I don't know, I'm going to hold this up here to my camera. This is the very first Polaroid I took, and I actually keep it in my notebook. And I just went down to the nearest city, and I just started taking pictures. And I sat down, and I just started describing what was in the picture. Like, oh, there's a man crossing the road. Oh, look, there's the 501 streetcar, Queen Street streetcar, which is a huge Toronto icon. And I just started describing that. And before I knew it, a story came out of it. And I imagined what this man did in the morning. And this was a Saturday morning and he was doing his groceries, and it just started evolving from there. And I just started practicing doing that every single day. And then I bought one of those little, you can get those little printers that you can print photos off from your phone. And it was great. And I would just put that in my notebook and I would just start writing what I was seeing.
What a great idea.
That's how the whole book came about, actually, right? Because I just started doing that, and then more of these ideas came to me, and that's where those prompts started happening. But it was just, and I tried to write in different ways too. So obviously I have my style that I fall back on, but I just started making up a horror movie, like a horror scene or a love story or any sci-fi, anything like that. And it just started getting me going back into writing, and without even realizing it, I started utilizing those daily practices, and it started to make me feel good. So there's the self-care and all of that. And that's how it all started for me, how I got back into it.
You know, I know everybody else has stuff they want to say. I just want to say to you, Caroline, that is such a phenomenal exercise. And I mean, I think, I don't know anybody who can't look at a picture and start writing. You know, you can, even if you're just like, there is a brown house. There is a dog sitting next to the brown house. You know? So excellent. Thank you.
And actually, sorry, I'll just say this quickly, that was actually, funnily enough, that was what they made us do to get into film school. So it wasn't, when I went, it wasn't just our grades. We also had to kind of go in for a session, and we could either write an essay, or they put up a painting of an old lady, and they were like, tell us about this woman.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Carolyn, I feel like that's a Pinterest board without the internet.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
All
want
right. Go ahead.
because it's that I think maybe Carolyn, you were the one who had said earlier is do something else creative. And I love that concept. And for me, staring at the page, staring at the computer screen, just so frustrated when somebody finally gave me permission to step away, take a break, walk away. And it's almost like playing hard to get with your book. All of a sudden you're like, where'd you go? Come back to me. But truly, it may be a day, it may be several days, it may be a week, but in going and freeing yourself to do something else, with an adult coloring book, taking a walk, this photography, I love that and can't wait to share it with my daughter because that will so inspire her. So that's amazing. And then I think that finding your way back in is each and every one of us has our own way of how do we get into that, that magical writing zone where we're in that place where the words aren't even of us, they're coming through us, and we know that when you get there, it's just like, and then it's trying to find that magic potion of how did I get there? And I do think it's possible for us to start to isolate that in reading, that some writers play a game of solitaire, some take a walk, some take a shower. And I discovered for myself, I had a stack of decorating magazines that were thrown out by the library, and I would just start page by page flipping through, and I could feel my eyes start to shift and the colors and the textures started to lift off the page. My eyes would go into that sort of soft gaze state, and then suddenly I'd hear the words. And then the magazines went off to the side and I started writing. So that was my magic potion. That is my magic potion. That's how I find my way in. So I think, to keep your eyes open, your mind open for, what's my magic potion? What's my way in? And knowing that it's so different for everybody, but be on the lookout for it.
Yeah. I love that.
For me, I was definitely taking a walk. Stepping away from the computer, walking, which made my Brittany Spaniel very happy.
Yes.
And as you're walking, and we would walk in nature, I would, in the back of my mind, my story was going through my head. And then all of a sudden there's this moment, and it feels like a puzzle piece, the final puzzle piece. And you just, like the light bulb goes off. And then if that wasn't working, the other thing that I do often is even if I have a section that I think is final, I will go back and edit that, because then I'm reminding myself of what I've written and I'm back in my story. And then sometimes that makes me realize what's going to happen later. So that also works for me.
Love it.
I'm going to take a different tack because I agree with what everyone is saying, and I love all the ideas. But certainly one of the things that motivates me with writer's block is being traditionally published. I have a deadline, and they've sent me money, and they want a book.
Right.
There's sort of an implied agreement there that I'm going to deliver that. And I know there are other people counting on me. That is that sales and marketing is waiting to develop the cover, my editor's waiting to make notes, all of those kinds of things. So I think sometimes just holding ourselves accountable, and there's a lot of psychology behind that. Like that's one of the reasons we think Weight Watchers work. It's not that it's the points. It's that that you have to go and stand on a scale with other people. So we hold ourselves accountable. So looking for, that community of writers that, Caroline was talking around someone who's going to say, you said you were going to turn in pages this week, sometimes is what I need to sit down. And that's why I think a lot of people sign up for writing coaches or sign up to take a writing class, is because then there's going to be a deadline. And while they'll pass that deadline off for someone for themselves, they won't do it for someone else. So that is often why.
Especially if you're paying for it.
It becomes that thing. And so you'll sit down and do it. And when I find that the words won't come, my first question is, what is that about? And it's often because I've taken a wrong direction in the story. And I come from a counseling background. That's what my day job was. So to be honest, I put my characters on the couch. So I sit them down and I say, like, what's going on for you? Like, and I'm asking them those questions in the way that Casey talked about, sort of talking to your book around trying to understand where they're coming from and what's motivating them, and what is it that they want to do, and how does that fit? And that often will sometimes shake something free for me. Mm-hmm. And then my last piece of advice is to change up what I'm doing. So in general, I believe part of what helps us is to have a habit. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it's turning on music. For some people, it's lighting a certain scented candle, or you sit at a certain desk, or whatever it is that you kind of cue your brain. You're doing what Casey's doing, where you're letting that soft focus come in, and then you're going to write. But if I'm really, really stuck, then I leave my typical space and I leave my laptop, which is the way I normally write, and I get out paper and pen and I just see what happens.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There's actually, and you all probably know this, but there's actual like scientific evidence and research that's been done that shows when you take a pen to paper, it opens up an entirely different line of creativity than sitting in front of a keyboard. So I think that's a fantastic idea. If you're struggling with the creative flow, just get out a journal and start writing with a pen. It just really is helpful.
I think the one thing though that everybody said in different words, that everybody said in different words, which I thought was amazing, is that everybody gets to know their characters or their story. So it doesn't matter if we're thinking of them as a child or sitting them on the couch or whatever we're doing with them. It's all about making them your friend and having them with you. And I think that that's sort of the key of however you're writing, because you want to be around, naturally you want to be around friends, no matter, even the introverts, right? We still like friends and people around us. So that's sort of a key to remember.
That's great. Okay, so go ahead.
The thought came to me that I think, Eileen, you triggered it in me, is that idea of reading your work out loud. I think so often we're just hearing it in our head, and it's a very different voice when we read our work out loud. And that's one of my always recommendations before you take the break, before you go off and do something creative elsewhere. If you're stuck, the very first thing I always say is go back and not just read it, but start reading it out loud. And that often will be enough just to help you dive back in.
That's also a very good editing tip when you get towards the end, is reading it out loud, because boy, do you catch some things that you're like, what on earth does that mean? When you're saying it out loud. That is a 77-line sentence. What? Oh my goodness. This has been really, really, really great information. We have to start wrapping things up, but I do want to ask one more very important question. And that is your suggestion on how often people should be writing and for how long when they're writing. Because I know this can be a point of of confusion and, I don't have time. So how much time should you really be writing? And I think JC's going to say, it depends on the goals of your book, because this is what I tell people too. And it depends on your timeline. But let's just pretend like everybody has the same goal, the same timeline. That'll make it easier. Eileen, we'll start with you.
I think if you're just starting out, the best thing you can do is just go a little easy on yourself and carve out sort of even just 15-minute sections out of your day. And I would usually tell people to try and do that kind of 5 or 6 days out of the week. I do find I need one day just to recharge, where I have absolutely let my subconscious do the work, and I don't worry about putting any words on the page. But otherwise, even just 15 minutes a day means that story's in your head and you're not having to kind of restart and then kind of grow it out from there. And that might mean that some days you can do an hour, some days you might be able to do 3 hours, but that part will grow and evolve, I think.
Caroline?
I agree, and I'm just going to build on that. So my thought would be every day, even for 15 minutes. And on those days where you really don't have time or you're really stressing out, take that writing time and make it your me time and do it just before bed. Have that piece of paper and pen right next to your bed and just spend 10, 15 minutes writing, even if it's about your day, or do what I do now, because I was inspired by a friend of mine. There's paper and pen that you can have in the shower. And as you're standing there and you get a great idea, pen it down in the shower. And that's part of the idea of always having a notebook and a pen on you, so that whenever you get ideas, you can write, so that you're constantly just keeping that feeling going, keeping that work going.
That sounds like the title of a really adult book. Pen it down when you're in the shower. Sorry, that just triggered that in my mind. I told y'all when we started, it's been a week.
No, that's awesome, actually. I love it.
JC.
So I believe in, and what works for me is writing every single day, even if there's a little bit of writer's block. But the time when I'm going to skip one day, then maybe the next day I think, okay, I don't quite have time again. So I really like to have some time every day. And I will say that when I really started writing more seriously was as my kids got older. So
good point.
Yeah. So I didn't, I'll just tell you really quickly. I had 3 sons, and they were all going to a overnight summer camp for 6 weeks. It's as they were older. And the local writing center in Minneapolis, I got their book of what their course offerings were for the summer. And it was as if the heavens had opened up, because they had a course called Finish Your Book in 6 Weeks. And the dates aligned perfectly.
Oh, nice.
So I took the class and I finished my book 2 years later. Having a goal and getting out there. So I wish everybody the best in just trying to find that time and trying to find 15 minutes a day.
Oh, and just to piggyback on what you just said, I think one of the most important things is that you give yourself grace, even if, that you have your ideal schedule, but be okay with it if it has to shift a little bit.
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
Casey.
I too my first book was written when the kids were really little, and I was, carving out the only time I had, which was from 5 to 7 in the morning and from 10 to 12 at night. And it was, to answer your question, first of all, I think it is so unique and individual to everybody. So I think you write when you can, and you capture inspiration when you can, and you get those words down on the page when you can. I even encourage my writers to just, we all seem to have smartphones these days, so have that, microphone going and speak your story, and then send it to yourself and get it transcribed that way. But this level, I think we go through gradual levels of commitment. And when I was, hiding myself in these hours between 5 and 7 and 10 and midnight, and then showing up for my family to be in the full capacity, it was kind of like this book was living on either ends of my day, and I wasn't letting it impact or have any influence on anyone else's life. And I remember the very specific day, I have ski racers living here in New Hampshire, and everybody's getting their ski clothes on and ready to take the kids off to racing. And I stood there and I said, I'm not going. And everybody was like, what do you mean you're not going? And I said, I'm going to stay here and work on my book. And I thought probably like the house would collapse in and they would be like, no, we can't live without you. And they all go, okay, have fun. And like turn around and walk out the door. And I was like, I spent like a year and a half like writing from 5 to 7 and midnight, and they were like, cool. And it was about me being really committed and saying, this is my priority, and that was the moment when I was like, damn, like I think I'm really a writer here and committed to getting this book out in the world. It was no longer living on the outskirts. It was a priority. And, I remember as my husband's like turning around and walking out the door, he's like, I'm proud of you. And that was the exact opposite of what I thought. So, there we are.
That's awesome. Well, we could do an entire additional segment on the things that we tell ourselves, the stories that we create in our head that are just not true. Oh, wow. This has been so amazing. I could talk to you all forever. I think we should set up our own monthly chat. Just bring it all in there. This was so great. I do want to offer you, everybody, the opportunity one last time to go around and make sure, if you want to hold up your book cover again, if you want to say your book, if you want to say your website, if you want to offer a piece of encouragement, Heck, if you want to do all three of those things. And we'll just go in the same order. Unless you want to do it backwards. If you feel like, Eileen, you're tired of going first and you want to start with Casey and go backwards.
Yeah, start with Casey.
All right, let's do it.
So, Preemie, Lessons in Love, Life, and Motherhood. Both books just won the Mom's Choice Award. Like, I love these golds.
Yay!
And then my Mom's Guide to Creating a Magical Life. And my website is CaseyMatthews.com. Casey with a K, Matthews with one T. Oh, there's so much, like just pearls of wisdom. So I would say be kind to yourself. You know, I mean, that's the big thing, is love and nurture yourself as you have this baby growing within.
I'm so glad that you continue to refer to as a baby, because I always reference book launches as like birthing a baby. So so funny. All right, JC.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has
Absolutely.
been amazing, and these women are fantastic. So my book is available to chat by JC Sutton, JACYSUTTON, and that's also my website, jcsutton.com. And I just would like to say that, so now that my kids are grown, I have a lot of women friends of this age, and watching the creativity that they, once the kids are out of the house and they have a little more time for themselves, it has been a renaissance of seeing so much creativity in so many different ways. So just empowering everyone to find the time to let that creativity shine and enjoy it.
I love it. Great advice. Caroline.
All right. So my book, again, is the visual writing prompts. And you can find me at carolinetopperman.com, and also my blog, which is styleontheside.com. That's where I am everywhere on social media, but I'm not hard to find as Caroline Topperman. And no, seriously, I'm like the only one in the world. That's
Try
my
being
little
a dwarf.
And the thing I would tell people, and I mean, this is something I struggle with too, so I get it, but I would tell people, don't be afraid of your words. Mm-hmm. Honestly, like, share them as much as you can, get used to that, because what you have to say is valuable. And that's just, it's something, you'll always help someone, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whatever you're writing, you'll always help someone. So don't be afraid to put it out there.
Awesome.
And I'm Eileen Cook, which is You Owe Me a Murder, which I'm actually a much nicer person than my title might lead you to believe. You can find me at eileencook.com, of course, and you can also find me at the Creative Academy, and we've donated a half price on the month membership if anyone's interested in trying it out, or we have a free resource room as well, so I'd encourage people to check that out. And what I would say to people is to look yourself in the mirror today and repeat the words, I am a writer. Mm-hmm. It took me years to own that. I would always say, I'm a counselor who also writes, I'm a wife, I'm this, I'm that. But if you're putting words on the page, you are a writer, and own that and be proud of that. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, I can't sum it up better than that. That's amazing. This was such an enjoyable panel. I know everybody has taken bookloads of notes on all of these fantastic tips. Thank you so very much. And I don't want to end it. I'm having a hard time pressing end. All right, thanks, ladies.